What we really need as a state is a fair, consistent framework.
Who should regulate ride-hailing companies could drive the conversation at the Capitol next session. Tonight, a look at legislation that would strip cities of their power to manage companies such as Uber and Lyft. Then, we're joined by two members of the House Transportation Committee to talk TNCs and toll roads. And we go one-on-one with TxDOT's executive director to find out if the agency is ready for a funding boost, plus what role President-elect Trump could play in Texas's transportation future. Capitol Tonight's State of the Session starts right now. Thanks for joining us for our special week-long series previewing the 85th Texas Legislature. I'm Karina Kling. Our focus tonight is on transportation, and one of the big debates ahead for lawmakers is likely deciding who should regulate ride-hailing companies. After an unsuccessful attempt last session, legislators are again filing bills that would regulate companies like Uber and Lyft on the state level. 17 cities in Texas have taken ride-hailing regulation into their own hands, and in some cases that's pushed Uber and Lyft out from operating there. Capitol Tonight's Leanne Wallace joins us now. And Leanne, how is this debate shaping up ahead of next session?
Karina, while cities continue to fight for local control, some lawmakers are looking at the big picture and hope to create a uniform statewide law the companies will agree to operate under. But pushback over fingerprint background checks and pressure from traditional taxi companies will no doubt come up. Getting around town by using a ride-hailing app is common, but the concept has only been around since 2011.
We had seen in the last couple of years, obviously through the news, and you start to see these services coming into operation, that there were going to be some policy issues.
Researchers at the Texas A&M Transportation Institute have been looking into this relatively new way of getting from point A to point B.
There are many, many questions about this new mode of transportation and what role it can play in addressing safety and addressing congestion, pollution, all of those kinds of things that we're concerned about.
For companies like Uber and Lyft,
fingerprint background checks are the biggest issue.
Austin was thrown into the middle of the national debate on how to best screen drivers. Uber and Lyft pulled their drivers from the city's streets after the city council moved to require drivers to undergo fingerprint background checks, and voters approved it.
It's about public safety and our local government's right to regulate and to enforce regulations that we believe are important to protect our citizens.
But it was Austin's ordinance that prompted Republican Senator Charles Schwartner to craft a statewide bill.
Right now, with ride sharing, we have a patchwork of inconsistent and somewhat arbitrary regulations put in place by municipalities and cities.
The legislation would trump any local ordinances, and it would not require fingerprinting.
I think we need a very vigorous federal comprehensive background check, but I don't believe fingerprinting adds anything to safety of those individuals availing themselves of ride sharing.
Another part of the debate, whether ride-hailing companies should be on a level playing field with traditional taxi companies.
Are you going to regulate them all the same, at the same level of government? Because traditionally that has been done at the local level. So there's a lot of sticky issues, I think, to work out.
Sticky issues that'll again play out under the pink dome. Well, so far, 41 states have passed laws to regulate ride-hailing in some fashion. 25 of those statewide laws supersede individual cities. Senator Schwartner believes that if his bill does pass, Uber and Lyft would resume operations in Austin.
And joining me now to talk more about ride-hailing legislation and other transportation needs this next session, two members of the House Transportation Committee, Chairman Joe Pickett and Representative Celia Israel. Thanks so much to both of you for being on the show.
Thank you.
The burning question, I think, for a lot of us in this area, in the capital city, will Uber and Lyft come back to Austin?
Well, I don't know that it's Uber and Lyft, but you have something now. I'd like to see all of it. The TNCs, the local referendum threw a monkey wrench into this area, and it's probably going to cause us to look at some kind of statewide minimums. But it's not only going to be Uber and Lyft and the TNCs. I think the discussion is going to bleed over into the taxis as well.
Representative Israel, I mean, you represent this area. I'm sure you've had conversations with city officials. Is the area of fingerprint background checks negotiable for the city?
I hope it is, because I've found quickly and I think I knew inherently, I just finished my first legislative session, there's no black and white, and victory's got to be someplace in the middle. My district is Pflugerville and Austin and Weberville, so I know there's a need for it. I know we've been growing and that it's a popular tool. It does involve safety, very convenient, so I'm going to be working to find common ground, but there's always the reality that if Austin wants it, maybe there's some leadership who suddenly doesn't want it. So we've got to be careful. We've got to be thoughtful and recognize that there's other cities who have similar issues. So we've got to work together.
I think, the big question that we've gone back and forth with between the cities and the state is, where does the regulating of these companies lie? And, we mentioned just the legislation that's being filed, and how do you see this breaking down in terms of the real local control versus state control?
Because it's based on new technology in the past, again, going back to just taxis, every municipality had similar but little differences. When TNCs came on the scene and it was no longer city by city, these were companies that started wherever, San Francisco, other parts of the country and the world, and they tried a platform that was something that they wanted to develop everywhere, but they ran into the problem of the municipality by municipality, and it was bumping along pretty well until Austin, Texas, when both sides left the table, as Celia had said, and then it went to a referendum, and frankly, it was the people in Austin that spoke. They may not have had all the information. Now everybody keeps saying that, but it is going to probably force the discussion to be looked at some statewide minimums or standards that's could make some municipalities unhappy. It's, Austin is dictating how we run our city business, and others just think that that's what we should be doing. So there'll be a lot of discussion about it, and I think it's going to be more than just fingerprints.
Sure.
We're hearing from the disabled community about having accessibility there. We're still looking about safety, insurance, even these technologies themselves. There's a lot of people that are out there, doing ride hailing now that aren't associated with any company. They just put the little square on their phone and take somebody's credit card. They're not licensed by anyone.
There's a conundrum, though, Karina, in that we have tried for several sessions to also pass a statewide ban on texting.
Sure.
And we've been told, well, different cities have their own regulations, so let them have their own regulations. Well, why is it any different where the TNCs are involved?
And that bill's coming back, too. That'll be one of the first ones that we'll probably hear this session.
Yeah, maybe we can do it this year.
Well, do you think a bill like the texting while driving being back before, gives kind of more reason to pass that one if you're going to be passing a statewide regulating these ride-hailing companies type bill?
You're asking us to be reasonable, and we're not always reasonable. But I know the chairman and I do hope that we can finally pass a statewide ban on texting at least.
And the texting one is always tough. I think the TNC is going to move forward. Last session, it was its first time before the legislature. It came out late. There was discussions on both sides. It broke down. I think they being people on both sides of the issue are going to start early. And I think just Texans in general want to resolve to that.
Let's talk about another big issue that's likely to take up some of your time next session, toll roads and trying to wean the state off of them. The cost to pay it off is about $37 billion, which you were recently told from TxDOT. So where do you start?
Well, I don't think we pay it off in total. I think there are state-operated tolls that need to go away. We've got we've got a road down in South Texas, Camino Colombia. We've got a road out in my area, the state, that's only used by 6% of the driving public 3 hours of the day. That's it. It makes no sense. The toll needs to be removed. I don't think banning tolls is the way to go, but I think organizing how the financing is done. There are members from North Texas that started this term toll fatigue. Some of them could sell their constituents on a new toll road if they really thought that by the time the bonds were retired and paid off, the toll went away. But you can't really do that anymore. The systems themselves have grown so big. We did an exercise on removing the toll off 130 here in Central Texas, and we came up with a plan that could actually work. And then it's like, well, we can't just pay off 130. You have to pay off 45 and 183A. And so what I would like to see this session is a way that tolls that are added to the state system be independent of the large amounts of dollars that have been put together so that you can swap one for another or pay one off. If the state does put money into a toll project, that money should be paid back, which isn't done right now. That would end the argument of double taxation.
My district is surrounded by tolls. It runs right along the Travis County line, and I hear a lot from my constituents, and you know that $6 to $8 a day adds up for a family when they feel like they have no other option. So I think Chairman Pickett did us all a service by putting the $37 billion price tag out there to say, here's the deal. I would love for us to be able to say we're at least working towards a plan so that your $6 toll could eventually become a $4 or a $2 toll. But just continuing to pay tolls into infinity is helping a few people, and it's not helping our constituents.
And we need to shine a light on it. I mean, if you're an entity that's operating one, and I'm really critical of them, they're managing millions of dollars, and a lot of them exist just to move money from one side of the ledger to the other. There's a couple of tolls in this state that cost $1 to collect the dollar. So who's benefiting? It's not the driving public, it's not safety, it's the people that operate the tolls, that send out the bills, that provide new equipment every 2 or 3 years. We got to change everything out. So we're feeding this monster of bureaucracy in the middle, and if nothing else, even what Celia said, if we reduce the tolls for working families or find a way to pay some of them off, it's a lot better way to go than what we've got today.
There's been some argument about that if transportation had been adequately funded, wouldn't have needed tolls in the first place. So voters approved, you guys put this to voters to boost funding for transportation needs in the state last year. Is the state more on track to be adequately funded when it comes to transportation?
The state is on track, but everybody has to realize, well, first off, let's bring in the tolls. In both Prop 1 in 2014 and Prop 7 in 2015, both of those have caveats that say you can't use them for tolls. So that's something that the public told us. So this new money is out there. Is it enough to get everything? No, it's not, but it's the biggest step that we've taken in decades. What I think needs to happen this session is the Department of Transportation needs to make good on doing it more efficient, transparent, get ready for the planning, get more people involved in their regions on priorities. When we've had excess monies before or windfall, a lot of it wasn't spent properly. So I think we need to do a better job and kind of put up now or shut up, because we went to the public twice. They've supported us huge. So now it's get the money out there, do it, and tamper the tolls and do a better job with the projects that are on the books.
What's your response to that in terms of just how adequately funded the department is?
Chairman Pickett knows I'm a big supporter of mass transportation. The best thing that we could say about toll roads is that at least a Cap Metro bus can ride it without paying a fee. And I would like us to get to a point where we have more assets like a park and ride, but not just a park and ride, a park and ride with dry cleaners and a coffee shop. Affordability and transportation are connected. We see it not just in our city, but every American city is going through an affordability struggle right now. So if we are more thoughtful about our transportation assets, so that someone can come in from Hutto to a park and ride and then get on a bus, and that bus is actually going faster than the rest of traffic or is not in stop and go traffic, then I think that's helpful. We're an urban state and we need urban solutions, and we're not there yet, but I want to be there yet.
And I'd like to see more big picture planning, and again, Celia is right on. Mass transit needs to be a part of any asphalt and concrete project that we do. The same board, the same body decides these, but they keep the projects separate. I'd like to see us kind of mix them together and give brownie points to a asphalt and concrete project that takes in the possibility of a park and ride and encourage more of that.
more collaboration. We are out of time, and I wanted to ask you about President-elect Trump and his plans for transportation. I'm going to talk more about that with the Executive Director of TxDOT, so we'll have to get you back in to see exactly how that's moving forward. Thank you to both of you.
It'll change. Whatever he says today, it's going to change tomorrow.
We will see how it plays out in the session as well. Thank you to both of you for being here.
Thanks for the topic.
Coming up next on Capitol Tonight's State of the Session, TxDOT's Executive Director joins us to answer the question of whether or not they're ready for the funding boost and the future of toll roads in Texas. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Capitol Tonight's State of the Session. I'm joined now by the Executive Director of the Texas Department of Transportation, James Bass. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Next September, you'll begin getting money from Proposition 7, of course, the constitutional amendment directing at least $2.5 billion a year in state sales tax revenue to TxDOT. A recent Sunset report said that the agency might not be ready for this influx of funding. What's your response to that? Are you guys ready?
So, number one, yes, we're ready for the new funding. Number two, structurally, the way it's going to work, the $2.5 billion will not come into TxDOT programs until probably mid-summer of 2018, because the General Revenue Fund must first receive $28 billion before any money comes into the State Highway Fund. So it'll be later in the year before we receive any funding. I'm confident that TxDOT is ready to develop projects to utilize that funding, because if we look over the last 10 years, the department has developed just around $54 billion worth of projects, and it actually awarded those contracts to have improvements underway. The last 10 years, funding was very sporadic. It came in different bits and pieces, which makes planning difficult. And so one of the great benefits of both Proposition 7 and then Prop 1 that preceded it is it gives the department and our planning partners better visibility into the funding that's going to be available over the next decade.
So it's really about having the adequate funding in place to move forward.
Correct. The adequate funding and a reliable, sustainable revenue source so we can plan around that.
A lot of Texans just wonder what exactly it means for me and what exactly it means for not being on congested roadways any longer, and really want to see, the effects of what they overwhelmingly approved. What can you tell them in terms of time frames? I know we've had you on the show and talked about this before, but just some of the upcoming projects and different things that'll be in place that we can really start to see a difference.
And so some of the improvements are actually already underway. You may recall from a previous visit that in addition to the voter-approved propositions, the legislature ended a decades-old practice of directing some monies that could have gone to TxDOT programs to assist and fund programs in other state agencies. That brought around $1.3 billion additional money to TxDOT programs this current biennium. Governor Greg Abbott directed our Transportation Commission to focus on congestion choke points around the state. And so that $1.3 billion has been identified and looking at congestion in the 5 large metro areas, San Antonio, Austin, Houston, Dallas, and Fort Worth. And so if you look in Austin area, I-35, 51st Street, Old Torf, there are already projects that are underway that are utilizing some of that funding. Now, some of the improvements we do take time to get in place for the construction activity to handle, so we realize that can be frustrating for drivers as they go through, but improvements are on the way and underway.
What can you tell, the public about and some more stuff that was in some of this report about what steps are being taken to be more transparent as an agency and making sure, projects are done in a timely fashion and just being more transparent with the public about what's going on?
So some of it we're working on developing performance measures that we will then share with our commission and the public through our website, showing what we hope the funding that's been provided is going to deliver on the system, and then tracking our progress against that as we go through time.
Let's talk about toll roads. And some lawmakers want to wean the state off of toll roads. And you've said recently that in order to pay off the debt, it would cost about $37 billion. What are some ideas for starting to try to pay this off and try to wean the state off of toll roads?
So a number of things on that. One, toll roads have been in existence in the state of Texas for around 60 years. So they've been a part of the transportation solution for quite a while. A major step, not in paying off the toll roads that are there now, but limiting the amount of additional toll roads that might be delivered, was the additional funding we talked about from Proposition 7 and Proposition 1, the ending of diversions. None of that money will be spent towards delivery of toll roads. And so that is going to limit the number that might have otherwise been in place in the state. The $37 billion is if that the toll roads that are in place today all got paid off early. And we'll leave that up to the policymakers in the legislature if they want to identify funding to direct towards that purpose.
Do you see this being a big issue next session that you guys will be at the forefront of? And just in terms, I know it got it to be a pretty heated hearing when you were telling them just exactly how much this would cost.
I think, again, we'll leave it up to the legislature, and I know there are a number of demands, not just in transportation, but across state government, and so the legislature will prioritize, and if they think it's a priority to start paying off some of these toll roads early, then obviously we would implement that.
There's been a lot of talk about what a Trump administration could mean for transportation, specifically here in Texas. Plenty of Texans voted for him, but they, as we've been talking about, bipartisan support or against toll roads and aren't really on board with those. Trump has proposed, putting plans in place to pass the American Energy and Infrastructure Act. The infrastructure plan leverages public-private partnerships. So how would that affect TxDOT?
Well, I think one of the things with the new administration, it's obviously very early. They're not in office yet, and we're not sure how Congress might react and respond to certain proposals from the administration. One of the things we are having conversations with our federal partners on is what we would call a structural inequality in the federal program. The federal money, when it's getting distributed to states currently, is utilizing 2000 census data. Obviously, the state of Texas has grown considerably, I think from around 20 million in that 2000 census to over 25 million in 2010 and 27 million today. One of the things we're hoping is that Congress will look at is using more current census data to do that formula distribution. And we believe if that updated information was utilized, it could mean as much as $700 million more per year to the state of Texas and our transportation programs.
What do you think it means in terms of toll roads, though, and trying to, move forward if the state's not wanting to do that, but maybe a Trump administration is pushing for more of that?
Yeah, I think that's going to yet to be seen. I think, the large part of the federal program remains to be funded by the federal gas tax and transfers from the federal general fund. And so I think there will always be a core federal program that Texas will participate in. And again, that's what we're hoping this structural inequality gets addressed. Whether or not there are toll roads proposed or promoted by the federal government, again, we'll leave that to the policymakers in Texas as to whether or not if they want TxDOT pursuing that. A lot of the decisions on toll roads in the future are really going to be locally driven. They're going to come from the metropolitan planning organizations throughout the state. And as those entities receive their share of the state funding from TxDOT programs, they're going to go through their project priority needs. They may, at the end of the day, find out that they still have projects left on their list after they've allocated all the funding available to them. That's then going to be a local decision as to whether or not they want to try and advance particular projects through a toll road. We're really going to look to the MPOs and local officials as to if that's what they want.
A lot of unknowns on the federal government side of things, at least moving into next session.
Correct.
James Bass, I know we'll get you back during the session and talk more about all of the wants and needs for the agency. Thanks so much for being on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
When we come back, a look ahead to tomorrow's show, which will focus on foster care reform. Capitol Tonight's State of the Session continues right after this quick break. We are out of of time tonight. Join us tomorrow as we continue our week-long series previewing the 85th Texas Legislature. Foster care reform will be the focus. With emergency funding recently approved for more hires and caseworker raises, lawmakers weigh in on how it'll help improve the embattled Child Protective Services Agency. Plus, what more they are looking to do next session to protect hundreds of vulnerable and abused children.
CPS is currently a system that is pretty darn near broken.
Join us for a discussion with lawmakers and policy experts on reforming foster care. That's tomorrow night at 7. Until then, thanks for watching. Have a great night.